Well, I thank you, Nikki, and appreciate that. I guess I'm just a voice, right, with some thoughts, not really more, but definitely not a teacher. So I think you were really on point with that, because when I came to education, so my background is more in the audio industries and music industry. I used to score movies and release albums, work with artists, running my own production company. First in Europe, then I moved to the US and basically had to restart everything there from scratch. And after a while, I felt that it was kind of the same thing. If you're really good at something, then clients will find you for that exact thing. So you kind of like create a destiny for yourself. You might not want to be like really good at one thing, because then that's all the clients will want from you, unless you're good with doing the same thing in their whole life. And I wasn't. So I looked around and I had absolutely no intention of getting into education. As a matter of fact, before all this happened, this was about 8-9 years ago, um, my opinion of education was so low that in public interviews I would talk really badly about education, and that's not what you expect to hear from someone who's supposed to be there to inspire the youth to go to college. And I said, it's just worthless. Just skip. Like, don't go there. Get real life experience instead. Um, but then I actually um, just totally by accident, it was by chance, I saw a bulletin board posting, um, which was with the Audio Engineering Society that I was member of. And what it talked about is that there's a college in Silicon Valley who wants to hire someone from the industry who would bring in industry knowledge and lead projects. And the projects are real life kind of projects that students work with each other in groups, and they needed someone who supervises these projects so that they can run the way they would run in real life with production studios, creating sound and music and all that. And I guess the critique and the cynical person in me made me stop and made me think about maybe that's an opportunity to well, maybe not to make fun of how things are being run, but it looks like there's an institution here that cares about how things are actually run in the real world. And that was my exact problem with education before, that it had such a big disconnect. Like, graduates would come to me for an internship and they would speak a different language in audio than what was spoken in industry. And so, like, okay, well, maybe that's actually an opportunity to make a difference. So I came to they flew me here to Silicon Valley, and I was in Dallas at that point. So it was, different environment, and I gave a master class, and what the discussion that happened after that was really the best part, because I thought that after my master class, where I basically told the student whose work was presented to me that most of his questions were not the right questions, and I gave him answers that he didn't ask questions about. And so I expected that they would tell me, well, you will have to pay attention to what students say, so we don't think we're a good fit. And instead, what the program director of audio told me, that they really liked my approach because it wasn't following anything that's in the textbooks, and that's exactly what they need, because they have plenty of people to teach the textbooks. And I said, okay, so what are the restrictions? Like, what do you have to go by if I end up teaching classes here? And the answer was nothing. You create the whole course content. That was the point when I was actually seriously interested. And then 2 months later, I actually started on my first class, and it was the type of teaching where you have no idea what you're going to teach the next week, because I never had taught before. So I was kind of, after classes, I jumped on kind of the systems and trying to come up with the content for the next class, the 2 days or 3 days later. And that's how I spent the first 2 semesters. It was pretty hard work, but one of the fruits of that, and that's actually how I met Nikki. Well, I don't even know how many years ago now. That was the creation of a program within the program. So it's still, the school has, which is now called University of Silicon Valley. It has a few different disciplines and departments. One is audio production, audio music production. The other one is game design. Third one is art and animation. And then we have ironically and interestingly, for the middle of Silicon Valley, where we are like right in the middle, we have a very small computer science program and a pretty small business program. So these are the main areas, main disciplines, and the program within the program that I created, we called it, we still call it MediaWorks. And what MediaWorks, what the model does is that we schedule classes where very different students from different disciplines, let's say animation students, audio students, and business students would come together. The classes are scheduled to run at the same time. And I get companies, different organizations. Sometimes these are local organizations. Sometimes they are from different places around the world, and they join us. And when we start the semester, students have to meet and get familiar with an organization, with a representative of an organization, that we make it a live discussion and connection. Also, they have to work together in the group of a bunch of other disciplines and very different students who all speak a different language, because they never really work together, never connect together. And so the idea here is that they work with this organization to create a piece. They use the skills, of course, that they learned in different classes, but that's the smaller focus of what kind of professional skills they learn. The bigger focus is how they connect with someone from real life, an organization, the leaders of that organization. So soft skill development, how they work together in a team with very, very different people, and how to distill down problems where they can really truly understand what our client, this organization, needs, and then produce that work, present that work. So my role in that case is not that of a typical professor, but rather a facilitator who brings these two sides together and lets them loose, because that's exactly the type of problems they have to solve after education. So after graduation, so it simply doesn't make sense for them to teach one thing, the skills, and then don't teach how to use those in real life. And then when the time they graduate, they have this huge step into real world, and of course that also makes it more difficult to hire them. But rather, it's more of a gradual process where they use the skills more and more for kind of with outside clients. And the only thing really that separates that type of work from what they will do in their first job is there's one thing, that they're paying for the class as opposed to getting paid for the work. That's the only difference. Otherwise, pressures, deadlines, having to completely destroy their work because the client's feedback is like, that's not what I was looking for. In a typical class, it's like, okay, let's see how you can modify, how you can make your work, better. That just doesn't exist. They have to restart often. When it comes to software, we don't teach software. We teach approaches, how to use whatever software it might be. Again, for many reasons. There is no such thing as an industry standard software that might exist today, but if they graduate in 4 years, no one can say what is going to be the industry standard program in 4 years. It doesn't make sense to teach something for 4 years that might be obsolete by the time they graduate, and they are going to be a specialist of something that's obsolete. So teaching the methods, asking the right questions, and the approaches to solving problems makes them much more adaptable. And to me, that's one of the key, the kind of the key objectives to reach for a student at graduation, that they are adaptive. They can get into an environment and find the methods, find the tools that work the best in that environment. A nice side effect of all this is that working with a wide variety of companies and organizations, this is real work. So what they submit, I try to find organizations who are not just like trying to help out education and throw them some, test project or something. But I want students to feel the pressure that they're responsible for the campaign, for the whatever that the company is planning to run, and they're creating a piece for that. Because that comes with the pressure of time, pressure of the client. These projects run in an extreme pace. As someone who had done this before I joined education for a couple of decades, I'm very familiar with how advertising, how film production, how the entertainment industry works. And because I did the same thing. And so the timeline that I set up is every client we meet, the students meet, they have to talk to the client. They have to, of course, they do a little bit of a research to prepare for the client who they're actually dealing with. But after that, they meet with the client, they ask the questions, they distill it down, creative brief, proposals, usual kind of agency type of work. They send up the proposals, client feedback, concept approval. They go through production and then present, and of course, many review sessions with the clients through this whole process. So usually it starts with understanding the problem and it ends with delivering and actually selling, pitching their final work as if they were competing against other agencies. This type of work, meeting only twice a week, full production from scratch. They can't use anything that's pre-made. 7 weeks. They have to go through this process in 7 weeks, meeting only twice a week. Of course, what that also requires students is that they set up their communication channels that are not typical school email that no one checks these days, but whatever it is. And they pick if they want to set up Slack. I support it, and we set it up for them. If they want whatever other platform, we set it up for them, and they make it work. Sometimes I tell them what the platform is. Sometimes the client wants to be part of the platform, and they define what that is. So basically, it's never the same class. Just like, as you know, in real life, we never have the same supervisor and the same client or the same expectations, or the same vendors or same partners. And so they have to come up with these solutions. Resources are, other than setting up these platforms in addition, are close to nothing. So other than checking out equipment from a lab that they can use for production, we don't really give them any resources. They have to be much more creative than that, than just throw the obvious solutions and a bunch of funding on them. That would not, I don't think that would go anywhere. And this is a model that we have been using and perfecting for, I think 2013, so 7 years. 7 years now. We've had about 50 shipped projects with students in these 7 years that came from 40 plus different clients, from Argentina to here in the corner in Silicon Valley, mom and pop shops, huge companies, Panasonic, small, big, every kind of companies, and of course European companies all over the place. The different culture, working culture in these different companies, also a factor that is a rare experience for most students. And the nice thing is that other than the experience itself, the one thing that I ask for from the clients is that students should be able to use the finished product as credits, as a reference piece on their portfolios. So when my graduates go to a job interview, the conversation goes a little bit differently, because the typical old school conversation is, what did you study? Where did you study? School name, what was your GPA? Then no one asks that anymore, but like 15 years ago, that was still a question. And let me see your transcript. What are the classes that you took? So that didn't work even 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the questions were, what kind of project did you do in class? What kind of work do you have? What kind of skills do you have? And even that is not good enough anymore, because the conversation, especially here in the Silicon Valley, looks something like this. So I see that you studied at this, you have this degree. What we're really all about is experience. Tell me what you have done with your skills. And I don't care if you graduated yesterday. What have you done with your skills? What are the results? Where's the work? And while most graduates from this area and from, I would say, in the US, will say, well, I have done this and this project in class, and we have this this assignment, and here's the outcome. For my graduates, that would be like a step-by-step direction. That's not really good enough. So what they say, well, here's my portfolio. Here's Panasonic. Here's an intro to a TEDx event that I did with Nikki. Here are the real things. If you click on them, you can see client testimonials, and you can see my work being used by real-life companies and organizations. So that's what I have done. And that now, for the employer, compares with something that a professional with a few years of professional experience will bring in. As a matter of fact, because this is such a professional experience, I tell my students that they absolutely should put some of these projects as professional experience on their resume, even though it technically happened in education, but it wasn't in the structure of the normal structure of education. So I went a little bit long into this, but I wanted to kind of give you the many outcomes and many different outcomes of what even just basically one class, I hate to call it class, but one scheduled course can achieve. Imagine if the entire education system, not just someone's degree plan, the entire education system was based on something like this. It would be a very different pace of completion. It would be a very different actual skills, practical skills learned. Imagine not only how that would contribute to companies and why it would be good, obviously, for students, as it is good for my students, but how productive that would be for humanity if we wouldn't waste for 8, 12, whatever years on learning that was once written in a book, and we're scrambling to update that, which obviously we can't do nearly as fast as we do even a website. But there would be actual skills taught, that the school was used not only for learning skills, but also for practicing those skills, gaining experience. And then when someone graduates, they're ready to contribute to the workforce, not train and learn, for an extra year or two, but actually from day one contribute. Everyone would win. So what are your views on this? What do you think?
Well, I'm with you, Julius. What ages do you work with?
Typically, youngest would be 19. The oldest would be really anything, because we have transfer students from other schools. We have people with a career in whatever industry, and they want to change. But mostly, I would say the average is probably 23, 24.
So do you have to grapple with students coming to you expecting to be taught this is how you do it. And what you're doing is you're saying, okay, go do it. And you're effectively dropping them in to what
Yeah.
we call the deep end with
Yes.
a bit of invisible safety nets. Does that sound like what you guys do?
To a large degree, yes, with the assurance that because they're still paying for the school, which means that they're paying for me to be there and they're my clients, which I make it very clear from the beginning. I'm there as a, if there's no safety net and before they hit the ground, I'm there to catch them and kind of help them out and show them the ways. But what I encourage much more is that we set up hierarchies like, there's a project manager, which is a student who, let's say, taking this class the second time. Fortunately, in the school, at the university, it's a small university, only about 600 students currently. And what allows us to do is to be much more agile and make changes fast. If we hear something that's coming out in the industry, next semester we're teaching it. Otherwise, everyone's missing the boat, especially the students. So, um, and so that allows us to set up structures where students can take, for example, this class, this program multiple times. And when they take the second or third time and they have more real life experience, they can be help to each other, just like when you join a new company, a seasoned person would be your mentor first and would help you out with the proprietary things. So, um, so, so I very rarely have to give them the solutions. Of course, the know-how is that what we're trying to transfer in these classes. So I'm kind of playing. I don't even know what would be the role. I'm kind of stirring the boat. I'm trying to make sure that the project goes in the direction that the client wants. So I don't let it to kind of get derailed. But I'm not doing the work. I'm not coming up with the solutions. I'm just kind of from the outside directing the project to make sure that it stays on track. Students stay on track. If I see that there are problems, then I don't interfere, but I see where it goes, and before there's blood, of course, I stop in. But sometimes I create competition. If there's no problem, I make a problem. If things are going too smoothly, I make sure that I throw in the monkey wrench or something, and that there is a problem, because that's an essential part that students will have to deal with. Sometimes what I do is within the team, I create sub-teams and they work against each other. So I create a healthy but a pretty strong competition where they want to win. And of course, they don't typically jeopardize each other's work. So it's somewhat of a friendly competition. But I had students who were getting feedback from me on their audio work. And usually we get feedback from everyone. So it's not just my review or my feedback, but everyone else is in the team. And I had a student team of 3 people at one point who asked everyone else to leave. They didn't want the other competing teams to hear what they had to present and their feedback, only me. So they didn't want to share. And that was an approach. We had a semester where usually I define what part of the production would be done individually, what part would be done as small teams or the whole team. And one semester I thought, what, let's do it this way. Who would like to work individually? And then there are students who prefer not to work with others, not to communicate with others, and of course they raise their hand. Okay, who would like to work in a team? There's some people. And I said, okay, you're going to work individually because that's how you want it to. You're going to work in a team. Let's see what are the advantages of working in a team at the end, or maybe what you can do on your own. So it's extremely flexible schedule, but it's done always with a close relation to how things are actually done in the real world. It has to make sense for that and not for academia.
This sounds so great. What about how are you? Do you? I'm sorry. I'm finding this very difficult to phrase, but it sounds to me as if you are approaching things from a real life experience background to give people skills and knowledge, and the desire to go out and actually do something with their skills and knowledge. How does the rest of the education community in which you're based treat you? Do they think you're a bit weird?
Good question. Well, let me to illustrate this with an answer that is simple. Let me just give you a fact. I submitted pretty much, more or less, a little bit customized, but pretty much the same kind of proposal to talk about, in the context of media production, talk about a new way of educating, to a few different conferences and corporate events and all that. Every education-backed conference, every conference that was part of academia rejected it, and they did not invite me to speak. Every single company said, this is new, this is fantastic, we definitely want you to speak. So that's my answer. They are afraid. And actually, one thing that I started, not afraid of me, but they're afraid of change. One thing that actually, let me share this with you. I didn't think that I would be pulling this up, but I think it will make sense. So one thing I started doing was I started working on creating an organization. This was about 1.5 years ago. When my ideas have matured, where I thought I put it together into a company or an organization, and be kind of like a public benefit type of company, and see how this would work for the education system, not just in one school, but let's start a revolution. And that was the idea behind this company. And I put all the methods and everything together, and I started kind of pitching the ideas, taking it to some investors, and kind of wanted to see how much support this would get. And I'm not even fully focused on this anymore, because it got stuck at the point where there are no partners in education. There's simply no partners in education who would want to, those who are receptive to the idea, they are not in positions to actually make a wave or make decisions. Those who are in those positions, for them, it's not crazy. You can see that they totally get it. But they simply can't make the change because they would have no partners in that. And it actually boils down to the core of academia, like you said, Marcus, that the teachers themselves, the longer someone has been teaching, the higher professor ranks they have, maybe with a few exceptions. But in general, the more they are afraid of kind of being pushed out by a new wave of doing things in a different way. So I don't know if I have, if I can share. Do I have, do you have sharing privileges here?
Yeah, you should have them.
Cool. So let me see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see the Speak Practical Education Evaluation Committee.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So let me just see. I wasn't prepared for a presentation, but let me go through. So the whole idea was reforming higher ed, was the whole idea here, and so here are the kind of different types of methods that everyone is trying to use, and everyone is feeling like this is the solution. I don't know if you're familiar with the flipped classroom model and the no school model, and I have an issue with every one of them. They are definitely a step forward, but they don't lead to an actual solution. So I'm not that really that crazy about them, because the problem is that they're treating the symptoms of the current education and not the real cause. So they're not really offering a solution that would change the system. They're just offering a painkiller of how differently teach. But the problem is the material. You're still teaching the same bad material because it's just not useful content. Students are paying a lot of money for the not useful content. So from an academia as an institution perspective, and from a student's family's perspective, it's a negative ROI. Not getting useful skills and paying for it, like how is that good? It's the value. That's the problem. So let me just go to the problem, and let me go to actually the method. I love horrible statistics, how bad education is. Everyone knows that. And this is the working model, but let me get, okay, here. So this is the traditional model. This is how much it focuses on the knowledge that's mostly acquired from books and taught by these really esteemed professors who've been teaching. The higher, value professors there are, that means the longer they have been teaching. The longer they have been teaching, that doesn't give them any more advantage to arrive to new methods, new technologies, because they're brand new. They might have the understanding of how things evolved, and that's fantastic, and I will get to that in a second, but doesn't really give them an advantage over me, who got into education 8 years ago. Then professional skill development is the secondary thing, and that students learn from assignments, and of course on advanced level, they learn after they graduate because they take internships, they take the first job, if they're lucky that there's a company who is willing to teach them those skills on a more practical level. And then soft skills is something that they learn as part of GE, general education. And they talk about, English and humanities and history and all that good stuff, which is very interesting and really fascinating. But how does it connect to a software engineer? How does it connect to an audio producer on their first job? It doesn't. And then if they're lucky, they have a portfolio class where they have this last minute preparation. Oh, let's do a mock interview. And then you have 4 weeks before you have to do it for real life. So why don't you get really good at it in 4 weeks? Well, that's not how it works. My model that I've been trying to infect my university with, and then hopefully beyond at one point, is knowledge. First of all, that's free. Internet. There's way more knowledge online than anyone could acquire or teach, even in any specialized subject. Pick anything. So why do we force students to sit in the schools and pay for that and use the electricity, or right now at home, and strain their neck looking at the screen, for Zoom classes? Well, they can do it on their own time and not pay for it, and it's all out there. YouTube videos are fantastic. YouTube is the second most used search engine after Google for video. Video content is the second way to serve everything. So how's that different of them looking at my real life video? It's not. So professional skills, should be learned in projects, and from mentors, from people who have done it, not from people who can speak about how it's done in this, but it actually never touched, the real life solutions, but those who have actually done it. So the real mentors, those who come in from industry professionals. This is why educators are so afraid. This is one of the reasons why they're so afraid. They teach from books or from their brain that's based on books. There's much more of that online, so that's taken away. Where the focus should be is that they teach the best practices that they gained throughout their lifetime in their career, sharing that. If someone is willing to be an educator, they should be open to share their best practices. And then I can give the knowledge of 20 years to a student. Of course, it's not going to be the same. They have to go through the experience themselves, which is why we have projects. But that can actually give them something that is not in books. And also with collaboration. So they have to work with industry, supervised by people in industry. And then the most important part, and you can see just the size of these boxes, soft skills. There have been surveys done in different industries, and there's one thing that is absolutely the same in all industries. which is employers were asked, what is the most important aspect that you hire fresh graduates based on? What is the highest priority? Their education diploma was number 7. Their portfolio and kind of the connection to real world type of solutions in their portfolio was number 2. You know what was number 1? The first impression that they create on the job interview. What is the impression that they create? And we don't teach that. And that's soft skills, that's communication, that's business, that's how to read the other person, that's how to talk, that's how to even email, that's how to put their resumes together, but not in a cookie cutter way, but how to customize their resumes, understanding what the company is needing from them, and then giving an answer to that. So I could go on and on, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea about where education could be and where it's not.
Thank you very much for that input. The first thing that came to my mind is a lot of junior positions. So right after college, university, or so on, they ask for 1 year of job experience. And in Germany, that's the biggest problem, because they see that you're not used to time pressure, you're not used to having no framework of problem solving and no clear requirements. So every additional experience you have makes you way more valuable. So then what do people do? They need to fill this somehow with working student expertise and so on. So especially, well, the field where I come from, economics, they teach you all the theory, and then in the end you start to do a little bit of statistics, maybe with some tools. And in real life, all you do as an economist is work with statistics and program something. For everything else, there's maybe a round table on Sunday on the telly where you have a senior economist talk a little bit, but else there's no job like that. So what they teach and then what you need to know is a lot different. And I still think there's a good knowledge base that is needed. So I like that you differentiated between the sizes of the components that are needed, because just a simple knowledge base is necessary to understand the whole framework. But then it gets more important to not repeat the same knowledge base over and over, but to get the experience. And yeah, in Germany, that's what I can say is that is not done in most universities.
Yeah. Well, you know, so the same requirements in the United States as far as someone applying for a job, at least a year of professional experience or investing experience is required. And it's such a simple and elegant solution. Like you said, the foundational skills, first 2 years in a 4-year college, and then the work experience in the second 2 year. And literally my students go to job interviews saying they have 2 years of industry experience because they did work in their 3rd and 4th year with the industry. So there's no gap. I just, you know, as someone again who is originally not from education, not from academia, it just really blows my mind that the people who go into teaching and they say that their best interest is that they're helping students to get jobs, but they still do the same thing, and they just teach every day the same thing. They take their paycheck and they complain how low that is, which is very often true. But instead of reforming this and actually helping students, they just got stuck in doing the exact same things the same way as they did 30 years ago. So it's such a simple concept, right? And education is afraid of it.
Yeah, I mean, especially in Germany, in the centers for professors publish papers. Teaching is just to gain reputation, to gain more salary, to gain, I don't know what, another title you probably can't get after professor, but yeah, write papers, and teaching is just a necessary evil that they have to do in order to work paid in academia and write their papers. Maybe they're passionate about this, but they're, a lot of them, the first focus are not the students. The students are just sort of paying their bills.
Yeah, exactly.
In a sense.
Of course, if you ask them, they'll say my principal focus is students, because they know that that's what people expect them to say. But in fact,
sure,
principal focus is on what they need to do in order to keep their job, which is quite often what are the assessment criteria which people are using. In our country, it's all about how you pass standardized tests.
Yes.
So I'm not going to teach you the joy of the subject or what to do with it or what you can actually do with it. I'm just going to teach you how to pass the test.
Yeah, so it's the same here. That I showed a few slides from this kind of my initiative is actually it's a business that helps truly focus on students and helps students to gain the skills. And here's the crazy thing, there's a model behind it, so you can actually even make money doing this. So it's, if everyone wins, and it's exactly like you mentioned, assessment. This organization that I kind of in the process of starting is an evaluation company. But what I evaluate is not the students, but the schools. And I give an advantage to those schools through this company and through a rating system, not like this, like there's so many rating, like educational, like reviews and whatnot, and magazines and websites that rank schools. But again, the problem is the criteria, how they say, like they say Stanford is the best. Why? Because it has the big name and it's expensive and it's hard to get in. But if you look at someone coming out of Stanford, what differentiates them is depending on what program they took. Actually, it's a really big difference. Stanford is right next to me, and I've talked to many, many graduates. And some I would hire in a heartbeat because Stanford actually allowed them to go through a lot of practical learning. And other disciplines I would never hire because they're trying to get a job based on the name on their diploma, and these kind of old school institutions, such a prestige, but it's not really good for companies either because they're hiring the prestige and they're not hiring the actual skills or innovators who typically come from smaller schools with less resources where they have to be more creative, and that's how they start innovating, and that's what they can bring to the companies. So my model is based on a unique kind of set of criteria that it's sort of an algorithm that you run through. Is the school doing that? Are these things being done in classes? Are the teachers doing this? And if the school satisfies these very unique criteria that I put together, and like I said, it kind of runs almost like an algorithm that takes on-site visits. So basically, they get me to visit the school, and they show me how students work together, whatever disconnected department. One school I did a test with had a program for like nurses, and they also had robotics program, completely different stuff. I came and they said, well, we understand that we don't score so high in your evaluation system, but how do you bring such different disciplines together? I gave them an idea for a project that they could develop into a full-scale, many, many years long kind of program right on the spot. How robotics and nursing can be brought together. Anything can be brought together. But this is one of the criteria. How the different disciplines are working together, just like in real life. And that gives them an evaluation. If we kind of, society understands this. I talk to parents and they understand the value of this. Yeah. And they thank me for teaching their kids to these kind of systems. And so if this got a little bit more voice, if this was a little bit more kind of a widespread idea and not just a few of us talking about it, then that could become an expectation, not from academia, from everyone else.
So Julius, in
Yes.
your opinion, if I was to ask you to guess, what percentage of people who are teaching young people, let's say from the age of about 13, 14, right the way through to 19 when you take them, what percentage of teachers do you think shouldn't be doing that job because they just don't have the knowledge or the application of knowledge in order to be useful for those kids? What percentage would you guess?
My guess, based on high school teachers that I talked to who visited my university and outreach programs and whatnot that took me to their schools. I mean, it's going to sound bad, but honestly, 98%.
Exactly right. I'm with you.
And I'm not trying to just throw out some impressive big number, but literally, I've probably met literally probably 100 of them in the past 8 years.
Yeah.
And I recall the faces, not the names, or the faces of 2 of them who were doing similar things and practical things, and all about adaptability for students. One of them actually sent some students to the university, and those students were so far ahead of other students who came from the more traditional methods. Also, my graduates in an extremely saturated field of media production, I think about it, music, how do you say music these days? They getting jobs. So for the school and for the different programs, now I have statistics that I can use to back up my statements that show that the employability of those students who go through these type of programs is way higher than those who go through the traditional ways of learning. So we have the proof. Not only we know, we trust in kind of what we do every day, but we have the proof. I even have the whole, the whole concept of the business concept. No one wants to take on it because they're afraid. And the education is just such a huge animal. It's just such an enormous machinery. And of course, when you have to deal with the government when it comes to assessment and for government loans, as long as they're government loans, the government wants to prescribe these assessment criteria, how they tell about the school if they're doing a good job or not. And as long as there are these assessors who typically are taking the job for great money, who don't want to do the teaching anymore because that's hard work, they are coming from this really old mindset, and so that's how they set their criteria, and that's forced back. It's kind of like an endless loop that's forced back on education, and no one wants to break this. No one wants to break this vicious cycle.